He dared a waitress to touch the piano. What happened next left everyone speechless. The night it happened, nobody was paying attention to Maya. That was the thing about being a waitress. You moved through a room full of people and became invisible the moment you stopped serving them. You were a hand refilling a glass, a voice reciting the soup of the day, a smile that said everything was fine without asking if it actually was. People looked at you without seeing you, and after a while you stopped expecting them to. Maya had worked at Chez Laurent for 3 years. She knew every table by number, every regular by preference, every corner of that dining room by the sound her shoes made crossing it. Table 4 always wanted the bread before the menu. The couple at table 9 every Thursday split one dessert and pretended not to. The man at the bar on rainy nights ordered the same whiskey twice and left without eating. She noticed all of it. She remembered all of it. That was the job, and she was good at it. The restaurant itself was the kind of place that made people feel important without saying so directly. Dark wood panels, low, warm lighting, white tablecloths that cost more to clean per week than Maya earned in 2 days. There were paintings on the walls that nobody had actually chosen, just purchased through a decorator who knew what looked expensive. Fresh flowers at the host's stand, replaced every Monday. And in the far corner, near the window that faced the street, a Steinway grand piano, black and polished and enormous, sitting on a small raised platform like a king on a very modest throne. The piano was played on Friday and Saturday evenings by a man named Gerald. Gerald was 63, wore a burgundy bow tie without irony, and had the comfortable authority of someone who had been doing one thing well for a very long time. He played standards mostly, Cole Porter, a little Sinatra, songs people half knew and could hum by the second chorus. He was good, not extraordinary, but good and reliable, and the kind of musician who understood that his job was to be background and to be proud of it. The rest of the week, the piano sat untouched. Nobody played it, nobody asked to. It was decorative in the way that grand things in restaurants often are present not for use, but for the feeling its presence created. It made the room feel cultured. It whispered to the guests that they were dining somewhere that had standards. Maya had walked past it probably 1,000 times. She had never touched it. There was no rule against it technically, no sign, no warning from the manager, a tightly wound man named Charles who communicated mostly through pointed silences and raised eyebrows. It was just understood. The piano was Gerald's territory, and when Gerald wasn't there, it was nobody's. Maya understood this without being told, the way she understood most things, quietly, practically, without complaint. She had grown up understanding things that way. Her mother had worked 2 jobs for most of Maya's childhood. Her father had left before Maya was old enough to remember his face without looking at photographs. There were no grand gestures in her upbringing, no dramatic turning points, just work and more work and the occasional small joy that tasted sweeter for being unexpected. A library book discovered on the right day, a song heard through a neighbor's window. The particular stillness of a house at 5 in the morning before anyone else was awake. She had found the piano at age 7, in the school music room, on a dare from a classmate who didn't think a skinny girl with second-hand shoes knew what the pedals were for. She had sat down and played a scale, one full scale, both hands steady and even. The classmate had not spoken to her differently after that, but Maya had gone back to that music room every day for the next 6 years, and then every day after that through middle school and high school, borrowing sheet music from the library, practicing on a second-hand keyboard in her bedroom, watching tutorial videos on the family's slow old computer until her eyes went dry. She was 17 when her music teacher, a sharp-eyed woman named Gloria, sat beside her after a practice session and said without softening it, "You have a gift. Not you play well, not you show promise, a gift." The specific word mattered. Gloria was not a woman who threw language around carelessly. Maya got a partial scholarship to a music conservatory at 19. She studied for 2 years. She was good there too, serious, focused, the kind of student who practiced long after the building went quiet. Her professors mentioned competitions. One of them, an older man who had performed in concert halls across Europe, told her she had the kind of technical discipline most students spend a decade chasing. Then her daughter was born. Lily came early, 7 weeks early, small and fierce, with lungs that worked harder than they should have had to. The first year was hospitals and insurance calls and learning to function on 3 hours of sleep. The music degree went on hold. The hold became a pause. The pause became a quiet closing of a door Maya chose not to stand in front of too long. She found waitressing because it paid steadily, the hours were flexible enough, and she was good with people. She was good with people because she paid attention, because she noticed things, because she had learned from a young age that the most useful thing you could offer another person was your full attention, even briefly. 3 years at Chez Laurent, 23 tables, 60 hours a week most weeks. A small apartment she shared with Lily and a cat named Biscuit who belonged to neither of them but had decided to stay. She did not talk about the conservatory. She did not talk about Gloria or the scholarship or what the older professor had said. She talked about Lily, about the shows Lily liked, about the drawings Lily made and taped to the refrigerator in arrangements that changed weekly, about Lily's teacher, who had recently sent home a note saying Lily had a natural talent for reading and had finished 3 books ahead of the class. That was the thing she allowed herself to be proud of out loud. Everything else she carried privately. On the Tuesday it happened, it was raining. Not dramatic rain, the quiet, persistent kind that made the streets dark and kept people indoors and gave the restaurant a particular kind of hushed intimacy, as if the whole city had lowered its voice. Maya had 6 tables that evening. 2 of them were empty by 8. The kitchen was quieter than usual. Even Charles had retreated to his office after the dinner rush. The man at table 9 had come in alone. He was somewhere around 50, with the look of someone who had spent a long time being useful and was now in a period of his life where he allowed himself to simply exist for an evening without agenda. He ordered the lamb. He asked for a wine recommendation and accepted hers without second-guessing it. He ate slowly, which Maya appreciated. The guests who ate slowly tended to notice things. They tended to leave better tips, not out of obligation, but out of genuine attention. His name, she would later find out, was Owen. Owen finished his lamb and sat back with his wine and looked around the dining room the way people do when they are comfortable and have nowhere else to be. His eyes moved across the paintings, across the other tables, across the window with its streaming rain, and then they landed on the piano. And then they landed on Maya's. She was refilling the water glass at table 11, not looking at him. "Excuse me," he called, politely, not the way some guests called across a room. She came over. He nodded toward the piano. "How long have you worked here?" 3 years, she said. "And you've never once played it," he said. It was not a question. She smiled, the professional one, the one that meant she was listening without committing to anything. "That's Gerald's piano." "Gerald's not here tonight." "No," she agreed. "He's here on Fridays and Saturdays." Owen looked at her for a moment, not in an uncomfortable way. More the way someone looks at a door they're curious about. "What would happen," he asked, "if you sat down and played something right now?" Maya looked at the piano, then at him. "Probably nothing." "Then I dare you," Owen said simply. He said it with the lightness of a man who genuinely didn't know what he was setting in motion. She laughed. She said she had other tables to check. She walked away. But the dare followed her. It followed her to table 11 and table 7 and back to the service station where she stood for a moment staring at the coffee machine without seeing it. It was ridiculous. She was at work. She was in her uniform. There were guests still dining and a kitchen still running and Charles somewhere behind a closed door and a piano that belonged to Gerald, who wore a burgundy bow tie and played Cole Porter, and had never once done anything to deserve having his territory claimed by a waitress on a slow Tuesday in the rain. It was a completely unreasonable thing to do. She thought about Gloria, the word gift. She hadn't thought about it in months. She thought about Lily at home, already asleep by now, a book still open on the pillow beside her the way it always was. She thought about the music room at school, the dare, the scale. Owen was putting on his coat. He had paid his bill, he had left a good tip. He was, in all likelihood, about to walk out into the rain and forget he had said anything at all, and tomorrow would be exactly the same as today, and next week the same as this one, and the piano would sit in the corner doing its quiet decorative job, and nobody would think anything of it. Maya set down her order pad. She walked to the piano. She sat down. The bench was lower than she expected, or maybe she had forgotten. It had been 14 months since she had sat at a piano, and the body forgets measurements even when the hands remember everything else. She adjusted without thinking about it, shifting her weight, feeling the worn wood of the bench the way it settled under her. Her hands went to her lap first, not the keys. She needed 1 second. Just one. The dining room continued around her. The couple at table 6 were talking in low voices, the man leaning forward, the woman turning her wine glass slowly by the stem. The two women at table 12 had not looked up from their conversation. The busboy, a young man named Pete, was clearing a corner table near the kitchen door, his back to her. Nobody had noticed her sit down. In a room full of people, she was still invisible. Old habit, old armor. She pressed her hands flat against the tops of the keys without playing them. The ivory was cool and smooth and familiar in a way that lived below memory, in the part of the body that does not forget things the mind has filed away. She could feel the slight give of the keys under pressure, the mechanical precision of the instrument beneath the surface, the whole complicated, beautiful machinery of it waiting. She thought about Ravel. Maurice Ravel had written Gaspard de la Nuit in 1908. 3 movements, each named after a poem, each more technically demanding than the last. It was not background music. It was not a piece you played at dinner parties to make guests comfortable. It was the kind of music that asked something of the listener, that required you to sit still and pay attention and let it do what it intended to do. It was famous in conservatories for being one of the most difficult pieces in the classical repertoire. Students spent years chasing it. Some never got there. Maya had learned it at 20. In the second year of her conservatory studies, on a dare from a fellow student named Claire, who said the third movement was unplayable at tempo without 3 more years of work. Maya had learned it in 4 months. She had not played it since Lily was born. She started with the first movement. The opening notes of Ondine were quiet. They always were, a shimmer of sound, delicate and quick, like light moving across water. The left hand established something steady underneath, while the right hand moved up and down the upper register in a pattern so rapid it looked, to anyone watching, physically impossible. It was not impossible. It was muscle memory and years, and the particular grammar of a body that had practiced a thing so deeply, it no longer required the brain to supervise every movement. But it felt impossible. It felt to Maya in that moment like speaking a language she had not spoken in over a year and finding it completely, fluently, perfectly intact. The notes were there, every one of them. Her hands knew where to go. The first person to notice was Pete. He had turned from the corner table with a stack of plates and stopped walking. He stood there, plates in hand, and watched, not rudely. He just stopped, the way people stop when something unexpected enters a room and the body responds before the mind catches up. Then the woman at table 12 touched her companion's arm. The man at table 6 stopped talking mid-sentence. It happened in slow motion and all at once. The room, which had been doing the ordinary quiet work of a Tuesday dinner service, reorganized itself around a new center of gravity without anyone deciding to do so. Conversations didn't end. They dissolved. The background sounds of a restaurant at work, the soft clink of cutlery, the murmur of voices, the low hum of the kitchen, faded behind something that had no business being in that room on a Tuesday night. Maya was not performing. That was the thing that people who were there that night kept trying to explain afterward, when they told the story to friends, when they described it to people who had not been present. She was not performing. She was not doing anything for the room. She was facing the piano and her back was mostly to the dining area and she could not see any of them. She was simply playing. The way you play something when nobody is watching and the music is for you and only you and the room you happen to be in is incidental. That was exactly why it was extraordinary. The first movement moved into its middle section, more complex now, the patterns shifting, the left hand crossing over in a way that looked, from a distance, like the hands were competing and cooperating at the same time. There was a moment in the piece, about 6 minutes in, where the music built and then fell away into something almost silent, a single line in the treble register, so quiet it barely carried across the room. Nobody moved during that moment. Nobody breathed, it seemed. Owen had stopped at the door. He had his coat on, his hand on the door handle, and he had stopped. He turned slowly and looked at the woman in the black apron sitting at the Steinway, and his expression was the expression of someone who has made a small joke and discovered it had a consequence he never anticipated. He stood there, hands still on the door, and did not leave. Charles came out of his office. Something had changed in the acoustics of the restaurant, not louder, but different, and Charles was the kind of man who noticed changes in his dining room the way a captain notices changes in the weather. He came through the kitchen door and stood in the corridor entrance and looked at the piano and looked at his waitress and looked at the guests, all of them still and watching. He did not say a word. He crossed his arms slowly and leaned against the doorframe and watched. The second movement, Legibbet, was different in character, slower, relentless. A single note repeated in the bass throughout like a bell that will not stop ringing, and over it, a melody that moved in a way that felt inevitable and terrible at the same time. It was the sound of something that could not be undone. People who did not know classical music could not have told you what they were hearing or why it affected them. They only knew it did. The woman at table 12 had tears in her eyes. She seemed mildly embarrassed by this and touched the corner of her eye quickly, as though she could attribute it to something else. Her companion reached across the table and covered her hand without comment. Pete had put the plates down. He had set them very carefully on the empty table beside him and turned fully to face the piano, his arms at his sides, and simply watched. He was 19. He had grown up listening to music that sounded nothing like this. But he understood, in the wordless way that music occasionally bypasses all the categories people use to organize what they like and don't like, that something was happening here that he would remember. Maya moved into the third movement. Sgarbo. If Ondine was a shimmer and Legibbet was a bell, Sgarbo was a storm. It was the most technically demanding of the three, a piece that required the hands to move at speeds and in configurations that seemed designed to test the limits of what 10 fingers could accomplish. Rapid leaps across the keyboard, both hands working in opposition. Sudden silences followed by walls of sound. It was a piece that could go wrong in 17 different ways in any given performance, and the going wrong was always audible and always obvious to anyone in the room. Maya did not go wrong. She played it the way she had practiced it at 20, in a practice room with a broken heater and a view of a parking lot, because she had given those months to nothing else. Her hands moved across the keyboard in patterns so fast they seemed to blur. The music swelled and contracted and swelled again. Owen let go of the door handle. He took 2 steps back into the restaurant, still in his coat, and stood there. The final minutes of Sgarbo were a controlled kind of chaos, the piano doing things that a piano should not be able to do this convincingly, the sound filling the dining room from wall to wall, the last long run of notes descending and then landing finally on the last chord, which Maya held. 1 measure, 2, and then lifted her hands. The silence that followed was the kind that is wait. It lasted 4 full seconds before Owen started clapping. He clapped with his whole hands, not the polite fingertips together applause of a theater interval, but real, full palm applause. And then the couple at table 6 joined, and then the women at table 12, and then Pete from across the room, and then 2 members of the kitchen staff who had appeared in the doorway at some point during the third movement without anyone noticing. One of the women at table 12 stood up. She stood up and clapped, and her companion stood beside her, and within 30 seconds, everyone who was still in that dining room was on their feet. Maya sat at the piano with her hands in her lap and looked at the keys. She did not take a bow. She did not turn around for a moment. She sat there, and for 3 seconds she let herself feel the full weight of what her hands had just remembered, and what 14 months of silence had cost, and what it had felt like to play. Then she turned around. The room was still applauding. Owen was standing near the door in his coat, clapping, and he looked like a man who had asked a simple question and gotten an answer that rearranged something inside him. Charles had uncrossed his arms. Maya stood up. She smoothed her apron. She picked up her order pad from the top of the piano where she had set it before sitting down. "Can I get anyone anything?" she said. She said it to the whole room. It took a moment. Then the couple at table 6 laughed, genuinely, the kind of laugh that releases something, and the moment softened, and people sat back down, and the dining room returned slowly to the sounds of itself. Owen walked over. He stopped a few feet away. He looked at her. "How long have you played?" he asked. "A while," she said. He shook his head slowly. "Why are you waitressing?" Maya looked at him steadily. "I like feeding people," she said. She went to check on table 11. Owen could not sleep that night. He lay in his hotel room. He was in the city on a consulting trip that was supposed to last 4 days but had already stretched into 8, and stared at the ceiling and thought about the woman in the black apron, not in any complicated way. More the way you think about something that has shifted a piece of your understanding of the world. A reminder that a person can contain whole universes the room they're standing in knows nothing about. He was not a music industry person. He was not a talent scout or a producer or anyone with any professional relevance to what he had witnessed. He was a logistics consultant from outside Leeds who had wandered into a restaurant in the rain because his hotel was 3 streets over and he had not wanted to eat alone in his room again. But he had a phone, and the phone had a camera, and he had started recording about 2 minutes into the first movement when he realized, with the slow certainty of someone watching something rare, that he was watching something rare. He reviewed the footage, 41 minutes of a woman playing Ravel in a restaurant, shot from near the entrance door, slightly shaky, the audio picking up both the piano and the ambient sounds of the room, the silence that had fallen and then the applause. The video was not perfect. The lighting was uneven and the angle was off and his hands had not been entirely steady. None of that mattered. What was in the video was entirely, unmistakably real. He thought about posting it. He turned his phone over twice. He thought about privacy. He thought about the fact that he had not asked Maya's permission. He thought about the fact that restaurants were public spaces, that no reasonable person could argue she had been filmed in a private setting, that the performance itself had been a conscious choice made in front of guests. He thought about her answer when he asked why she was waitressing. He put his phone on the nightstand. He fell asleep around 2 in the morning. When he woke up, he posted it. He wrote nothing in the caption. He did not explain what he was sharing or who was in the video. He simply titled it, "Waitress Plays Piano at the Restaurant Where She Works, Tuesday Night." He had 412 followers, mostly colleagues and former colleagues and his sister in Manchester and a neighbor who posted exclusively about her garden. By the time he showered and came downstairs for breakfast, the post had 11,000 views. He stood in the hotel lobby and stared at his phone. By the time he finished his breakfast, it was 40,000. He called his sister. She had already seen it. She had already shared it. She said, "Owen, do you know who she is?" He did not know who she was. Nobody did. That was the point. The video traveled the way things travel when they hit a specific nerve. It was not the technical quality of the playing, though the people who knew what they were listening to were the first to share it. The music students, the piano teachers, the classical music accounts on social media that had developed followings of people who genuinely cared about these things. Within 6 hours, 3 separate music academics had posted commentary identifying the piece as Ravel's Gaspard de la Nuit and explaining, in terms accessible to non-musicians, exactly how difficult it was. But it was not only the musicians who were sharing it. It was everyone else. Because the video was not, in the end, only about the piano, it was about the apron. It was about the order pad she had set on top of the instrument before she sat down. It was about the way she did not announce herself, did not ask anyone's permission, did not perform for the room. It was about the way she had walked back to her tables afterward and asked if anyone needed anything. It was about a person who contained something enormous and carried it quietly. People understood that without being told. They shared it because it said something they did not have language for but recognized immediately. By Thursday morning, 36 hours after Owen posted the video, it had been viewed 9 million times across multiple platforms. 3 television morning shows had mentioned it. A music conservatory in Boston had posted publicly asking if anyone knew the identity of the woman in the video. 2 concert promoters had reached out to the restaurant directly. Charles, the manager, found all of this deeply stressful. He called Maya on Wednesday afternoon. She was home, between shifts, sitting on the kitchen floor while Lily arranged a set of colored pencils into what she described as a very specific pattern that had to be exactly right before she could begin drawing. "There's something happening," Charles said. He was not a man who spoke in unclear terms, but he sounded unclear, with the video. Maya had not seen the video. She had not known about the video. She sat on the kitchen floor and listened to Charles explain it. Then she looked at Lily, who was placing a yellow pencil between an orange and a green with the focused intensity of an architect. "How many views?" Maya asked. Charles told her. Maya was quiet for a moment. Lily looked up. "Mama, are you okay?" "I'm fine, baby," Maya said. "Keep going. I want to see the pattern when it's done." She went to her bedroom and found the video in 30 seconds. It was not hard to find. It had accumulated so many shares that her own name, which she had not given Owen, which was not attached to the video in any way, was already being searched for in the comments section by thousands of people who wanted to know who she was. She watched 41 minutes of herself. It was a strange thing, watching yourself do something you did not know anyone was filming, seeing your own back in your own hands and hearing the music come out of the phone's small speaker in a way that was both familiar and completely foreign, like hearing your own voice recorded, the distance of it. She watched until the end, until the applause, until she stood up and smoothed her apron and picked up her order pad. She closed the video. She sat on the edge of her bed for a long time. Then she went back to the kitchen and sat beside Lily on the floor and looked at the pencil arrangement, which was now almost complete, and said it was beautiful, which it genuinely was. "What comes after the pattern?" Maya asked. Lily considered. "A horse," she said, "or maybe a house, I haven't decided." Maya nodded. "Take your time," she said. She meant the drawing, she also meant something else. She was not sure what yet. The phone kept going. By Thursday evening, she had received 47 messages through the restaurant's public contact form because her name had been found. One of the other waitstaff had been interviewed by a local journalist, not unkindly, and had mentioned her name without thinking about the scale of what was now happening. Her own social media accounts, which she had not updated in 8 months, and which contained mostly photographs of Lily and one picture of Biscuit the cat asleep in a laundry basket, began receiving notifications at a pace she could not track. She turned the notifications off. She called her mother, who lived an hour outside the city, and had seen the video because Maya's cousin had shared it on a family group chat before anyone knew it was Maya. Her mother said, "Why didn't you tell me you still played?" Maya did not answer that directly. She said, "I might need you to take Lily this weekend." Her mother said, "Whatever you need." Maya sat at the kitchen table after Lily went to bed and made a list. Not an emotional list, a practical one. What was being offered? What each thing would require, what Lily's schedule looked like over the next 3 months, what the medical costs were looking like for the rest of the year, what she owed to herself, what she owed to other people, what she was afraid of, what she was more afraid of. She wrote it all out in a notebook in small, neat handwriting, the same handwriting she used for orders. At the bottom of the page, she wrote one question. It said, "What did you think you were going to do forever?" She did not answer it that night. She closed the notebook and washed the dishes and checked on Lily once, and then went to bed. The morning show reached out on Friday. Not through the restaurant this time, through a music journalist named Simon, who had written a piece about the video that had been shared more widely than the original post, and who had tracked down Maya's email address through channels she did not entirely understand, but accepted as the reality of the current situation. Simon's email was short. He said he was not trying to pressure her. He said the morning show wanted to offer her an in-studio performance if she was interested. No obligation, no strings, and they would cover travel and accommodation. He said there were also 2 other inquiries he wanted to pass along if she was open to hearing them, but he would not do that without her permission first. He said, "I've watched the video 11 times, and I want you to know that what you played was not background music. It was a performance, and I think you knew that when you sat down." Maya read the email 3 times. She wrote back, "Give me until Sunday." Then she went to work. It was a Friday. Gerald was in, bow tie and all, playing Cole Porter in the corner with the comfortable authority of a man who had not heard about any of this, or if he had decided not to incorporate it into his evening. The dining room filled up. The noise level rose. The tablecloths were white and the flowers were fresh, and Charles moved through the room with the slightly pressured energy of a man managing more than usual. He stopped beside Maya at one point, near table 7. He did not say anything for a moment, he just stood there. Then he said, "I'm sorry for not asking before I spoke to that journalist." Maya looked at him. This was more words of that kind than Charles had ever offered in 3 years. "It's okay," she said. "It's not entirely," he said. He straightened slightly, "but I wanted to say it." She nodded. He moved on. She went to table 7. The shift was normal in every way that mattered. Refills, bread service. The couple at table 9 sharing one dessert again. Pete at the busboy station, who caught her eye across the room at one point and gave her a small nod, not dramatic, just real, which she returned. At the end of the shift, before she left, she stopped near the Steinway. Gerald had packed up and gone. The dining room was nearly empty. Charles was in his office. She stood next to the piano and did not sit down. She put her hand on the lid, flat, just for a moment. 14 months was a long time to let something wait, but the piano had waited, the music had waited. Her hands had kept everything, stored it without her permission, held it the way the body holds things the mind tries to set down. She drove home. Lily was all ready with her mother for the weekend. The apartment was quiet in a way that felt unusually large. She sat at the kitchen table with the notebook and looked at the question she had written 3 days ago. What did you think you were going to do forever? She picked up the pen. She wrote underneath it, I thought I was being practical. She looked at that for a while. Then she wrote, I think I was also hiding. She closed the notebook. She opened Simon's email on her phone. She typed, here is what I am willing to consider and what I am not. She wrote 4 sentences, clear and direct, the same way she had always communicated things, the same way she took orders and confirmed allergies and handled the particular choreography of feeding a room full of people efficiently and without confusion. She knew what she wanted. She had known for 3 days and had been making sure before she said it. She pressed send. Then she called her mother and asked to speak to Lily. Lily was still awake, which was not entirely surprising. She answered the phone with immediate news about a dog her grandmother's neighbor had, which had apparently looked at her through the fence that afternoon in a way that Lily described as very serious and also friendly. That sounds like a good dog, Maya said. I think we should get a dog, Lily said. We have Biscuit. Biscuit doesn't play with me. Biscuit doesn't play with anyone, Maya said. That's part of his personality. Lily laughed. Lily's laugh was still the best sound Maya knew. I'll be there tomorrow, Maya said. We can go to the park. With Biscuit. Biscuit doesn't go to parks. I know, Lily said. I was joking. When did you learn sarcasm? Maya asked. I've always known it, Lily said. Maya smiled. After she hung up, she sat in the quiet apartment for a little while longer. The cat was on the windowsill, doing exactly what Biscuit always did, which was observe the outside world with complete seriousness and no intention of interacting with it. She looked at the space where a piano might go, if she ever had room for one. She had thought about it off and on. The apartment was not big, but if the kitchen table moved and the bookshelf moved, there was a wall beside the window where something could fit. She had measured it once a year ago and then put the measurement in a drawer with the other things she had not been ready to act on. Tomorrow she would get to the park. Sunday she would see what Simon said back. Monday she would return to tables 7 through 12, refills without asking, bread before the menu, the particular quiet work of feeding people and noticing what they needed. And something else alongside that, whatever shape it took. She did not know yet, but for the first time in 14 months, the not knowing felt like an open door instead of a closed one. That was enough for tonight. The email from the conservatory in Boston came on Monday morning. Maya was on her way into the restaurant for the lunch shift when it arrived. She read it standing outside on the pavement, coat on, bag over one shoulder, the city moving around her in its usual hurry. The message was from the director of performance studies. Her name was Dr. Carol Finch. She had seen the video. She said she had also watched it 11 or 12 times, which seemed to be the number people kept landing on. She said she was not writing to offer Maya anything contingent on media attention or the current moment. She said she was writing because she had spent 30 years in this field and she knew what she was seeing, and what she was seeing was someone who had not stopped being a musician simply because circumstance had required her to set the instrument down. She said, we have a visiting artist program. It is not a full-time commitment. It is 4 weekends a semester. We cover travel. We offer a small honorarium. The expectation is 1 master class per visit and 1 public performance. The rest of the time is yours. She said, I am not asking you to change your life. I am asking if part of your life has room for this. Maya stood on the pavement for an extra 30 seconds. Then she went inside and worked the lunch shift. She did not answer the email until that evening, after Lily was in bed and the apartment was quiet and Biscuit had relocated from the windowsill to the armchair with the seriousness of someone executing a long-considered plan. She sat at the kitchen table with the notebook. She wrote out the math first, the way she always did things, the visiting artist's schedule against Lily's medical appointments, the travel days against the school calendar, the honorarium against the current monthly shortfall, the distance from what she had against the distance to what this was. The numbers worked, not comfortably, but honestly. Then she wrote out the other calculation, the one that had no column for numbers. She had been 20 when she learned Gaspard de la Nuit. She had been 26 when she played it in a restaurant on a Tuesday night because a stranger dared her to. She was still 26, barely, for another 4 months. She wrote, "How long are you going to wait for the right time?" She knew the answer. She had always known it. The right time was not coming. The right time was a story people told themselves while they waited for courage to arrive prepackaged and risk-free. Courage did not arrive that way. She had sat down at that piano on a Tuesday night in the rain, in her work apron, in front of strangers, not because the conditions were right. She had sat down because a man in a coat had said, "I dare you," and something in her, older than the past 14 months and braver than the practical woman who managed everything carefully, had said, "Fine." She wrote back to Dr. Finch. Short 4 sentences. Yes, she was interested. Yes, she had questions about scheduling. Could they speak by phone this week? She was available Tuesday or Thursday evening after 7. She pressed send. She sat back. The morning show performance was scheduled for the following Friday. Simon had confirmed the details after Maya's initial email and the back and forth that followed. It was a live slot, 8 minutes. They wanted Ravel, specifically. They had checked with her first, which she appreciated. She would perform in the studio, in front of the cameras, and whatever audience occupied the standing area on that particular morning. She had not performed in front of any audience since her final conservatory recital 6 years ago. She did not feel ready. She also understood, at this point, that readiness was not the prerequisite she had once believed it to be. She practiced every evening that week. She had borrowed time at the church hall 2 streets over from the apartment. A woman named Dorothy, who ran the community programs there, had seen the video, had reached out through the restaurant, and had offered the use of the church's old upright piano at no charge on any evening after 6 when the hall was not in use. It was not a Steinway. The third pedal stuck slightly. 2 of the upper keys had the faintest resistance that was not entirely even. Maya loved it. She played for 2 hours each evening after Lily was in bed and her mother came to sit with her. She played through the Ravel, which her hands still held complete. She played other things too, pieces she had not touched in years, things she had learned at 17 and set aside in favor of more demanding repertoire, things she had always meant to return to and had not. She played a Chopin nocturne slowly, because she had been playing it fast for years and had never once taken it apart to feel what was actually inside it. She discovered things she had not known were there. That was the other thing about the past 14 months. She had assumed the time away was loss, pure loss. A door closed, skills fading, the gap between who she had been at 20 and who she was now. But she was not 20 anymore. She understood things now she could not have understood then, about loss and about time and about what mattered, about the specific gravity of a note played in a room where someone needs to hear it, even if they don't know they do, about the piano not as a competition or a career ambition, but as the thing it had always been, before the scholarship and the professors and the graded performances, a room she could enter when the rest of the world was too loud. She played all week. On Thursday, Dr. Finch called. The conversation lasted 45 minutes, practical for the first 20. Then something shifted, and it became the kind of conversation Maya had not had in years, 2 people who understood the same thing talking about it without needing to explain the basics. Dr. Finch had been a performer herself years ago. She said, "I made the same calculation you did and chose the career." She did not say whether she had regretted it. She did not need to. By the end of the call, the visiting artist arrangement was confirmed. First weekend the following semester. Maya put the phone down. She looked at Biscuit, who was looking back at her. "That happened," she said. Biscuit blinked once and looked away. Friday came. The morning show studio was smaller than it looked on television. She had expected something large and glamorous and found instead a functional room with very bright lighting and a very good piano, a Yamaha concert grand, which was different from the Steinway at the restaurant but responsive in the way all good instruments are, willing to meet you where you are. The producer was a woman named Kate, brisk and warm at the same time. She showed Maya where to stand for the pre-performance interview, where the piano was, what the 8 minutes would look like. She did not treat Maya like a novelty. She treated her like a musician, which Maya noticed and was grateful for without saying so. The hosts were pleasant. The interview was 3 minutes: who she was, how long she had played, what happened that Tuesday night. Maya answered directly, without embellishment. When the host asked how it felt to go viral, Maya said, "Strange, mostly strange." The host laughed, the audience in the standing area laughed. Then Maya walked to the piano and sat down. She played the full first movement of Gaspard de la Nuit. She played it the way she had played it Tuesday night at Chez Laurent, in her apron in the rain, because a man in a coat dared her to. She played it not for the cameras or the studio or the viewers at home or the comments that would follow or the views that would accumulate. She played it because it was there and she was here and her hands knew everything and it was time. When she finished, the standing area was silent for a moment. Then it was not. She sat at the piano for a second, too. Then she stood up. She did not take the bow she was supposed to take. She forgot. The host reminded her gently, gesturing toward the audience, and Maya looked at the room and nodded once, a small, real acknowledgement before walking back to her chair. The host said, "That was absolutely extraordinary." Maya said, "Thank you." The host said, "What's next for you?" Maya looked at the camera and then at the host and then at the audience, all these people she did not know who had just been in a room with her while she played. She said, "I have a lunch shift this afternoon, and then I'm borrowing a church piano and playing for 2 hours." She said, "And I have a master class in Boston next semester." She said, "And my daughter Lily, she's been asking me to get a dog, which I am still thinking about." The audience laughed, the host laughed. Maya smiled the real smile, not the professional one, the other one. She went home. She picked Lily up from school. Lily ran to her from the door of the classroom the way she always did, bag bouncing, already talking before she was fully out of the building. She said, "Mrs. Elliott, let us watch your video today." She said, "All the kids thought it was really cool." She said, "Jeremy said his mom cried, but Jeremy is always exaggerating." Maya took Lily's hand. They walked to the corner store and Maya bought Lily a juice box and herself a coffee, and they sat on the wall outside in the November cold, and Lily talked about Jeremy and the dog situation, and the drawing she was going to finish this weekend, which had ended up being a horse after all, standing in front of a house. Maya drank her coffee. The city moved around them. Somewhere in a restaurant 3 streets over, a black Steinway sat in the corner of a dining room in the particular quiet of a Friday afternoon, waiting for Gerald and his burgundy bow tie. The tablecloths were white, the flowers were fresh. Maya looked at Lily. She thought, this is the other thing the video didn't show. This right here. The juice box in the cold air and the horse standing in front of the house that hasn't been drawn yet, and all the things a person carries that a room full of strangers will never know, and the specific ordinary extraordinary weight of a life that is fully, completely, messily yours. She finished her coffee. "Come on," she said to Lily, "let's go home." Lily jumped off the wall. They walked